Dear friends, a man, if he is to maintain the integrity of his soul and the sanctity of his path, must understand the sacred necessity of concealment. Not all things born within him are meant for the eyes of another, no matter how close they stand to his heart. There are chambers of the masculine spirit that must remain locked, not out of cruelty nor deceit, but because the growth of the soul requires solitude. A man who reveals everything to a woman, even one he loves dearly, abandons the mystery that sustains his inner power and dilutes the very force that makes him whole. First, a man must guard his deepest fears. To lay bare every tremor of the heart is to erode the silent resilience that fortifies him against the storms of life. Fear, confessed prematurely, transforms not into intimacy, but into exposure. A man's battle with his demons is a private war. It is in the wrestling, in the solitude of struggle, that he defines himself. To demand that a woman witness every crack in his armor is not to trust her. It is to burden her with a fight that is not hers to bear. His fears must become the dark stones he carries alone, refining his spirit through quiet confrontation, not loud confession. Second, a man must conceal the full extent of his ambitions. Dreams are delicate in their infancy. They are tender flames, easily snuffed out by misunderstanding, doubt, or even unintended scorn. When a man unveils every corner of his aspiration, he invites judgment into the sacred process of becoming. A woman may support him, she may love him, but she cannot walk the labyrinth of his destiny in his stead. His visions must be protected within the sanctuary of his own soul until they are strong enough to survive the world's scrutiny. They are not ornaments to be admired. They are seeds meant to be planted in silence and grown in the unseen soil of perseverance. Third, a man must withhold the full depth of his suffering. There are agonies that no other heart can soothe, no matter how profound their love. A woman may desire to heal, to console, but there are wounds that, if shared too openly, diminish the man's standing in her eyes. Not because she lacks compassion, but because the unconscious mind seeks strength in the masculine, not endless confession. The alchemy of pain demands that the man bears it, transforms it, and emerges stronger, not that he spills it forth in desperate need of rescue. His suffering must be transmuted into wisdom, into gravitas, into an invisible force that steadies his hand and sharpens his gaze. To make his suffering a spectacle is to lose the silent nobility that commands respect without demanding it. The architecture of a man's life must include hidden rooms, sacred spaces untouched by the hands of even his most intimate companions. A man who hides nothing becomes predictable, pliable, and eventually pitiable. The masculine spirit demands a measure of opacity. It is not a betrayal to keep these truths veiled. It is an act of profound loyalty to himself, to the journey he is tasked to complete, and ultimately to the woman who deserves a man who has forged himself, not one who has bled himself dry before her altar. There is a wisdom older than words, one that whispers that true strength is found not in the desperate revealing of every thought and feeling, but in the chosen silence that protects what is still becoming. A man who understands this moves differently. He speaks less, but with more weight. He acts with deliberate force, carrying unseen oceans within him. His mystery is not manipulation. It is magnetism born of restraint. And though she may never fully understand all that he withholds, she will feel it, the grounding, the depth, the unwavering presence of a man who belongs not to the whims of the world, but to the unshakable fortress of his own becoming. There is a sacred realm within every man's soul where the raw, untamed fears reside. Fears that, if unguarded, would unravel the very fabric of his being. A man is not made weaker by the presence of fear. He is weakened by the careless exposure of it. Fear is an ancient visitor to the heart of man, older than civilization itself, older than the words we use to name it. It arises from the dark, wordless places that remember the primordial dangers of existence, of being prey, of being abandoned, of being forgotten. And yet these fears are not curses. They are invitations to become, but only if a man bears them properly. To reveal one's deepest fears is to misunderstand their purpose. Fear is not an ailment to be cured by the sympathy of others. Fear is the stone against which the blade of the Spirit must be sharpened. A man who runs to disclose his fears seeks not courage but comfort, and comfort is the slow death of all that is vital and strong within him. It is a betrayal of his own becoming. No one else can wage his battles for him. No one else can hold his hand through the trials that were destined for his soul alone. A man must carry his fears into the inner sanctum of silence and solitude and face them as a knight faces a dragon, not weeping at its terror, but preparing for the inevitable clash that will define his worth. When a man reveals his fears too freely, he bleeds away the energy that is meant to forge him. The act of confession, if untempered, transforms into an unconscious plea. Save me. But there is no saving that comes from without. Salvation is an inward conquest. Those who hear his fears cannot rescue him. At best, they can pity him, and pity is the most poisonous substitute for respect. Even the kindest love cannot replace the deep need a man has to respect himself. And respect is born not from indulgence, but from endurance. From knowing that he can stand against the shadow alone, without applause, without witnesses, without guarantees. There is a temptation in the modern world to seek catharsis in disclosure. We are taught that honesty is an unqualified virtue, that the mere act of revealing our wounds somehow heals them. But for a man, not all truths are meant for the light. Some truths are sacred precisely because they are hidden. They are the seeds of his future strength, planted in the dark soil of his private suffering. To expose them too early is to uproot them before they have grown into mighty trees. It is to mistake vulnerability for strength, when in fact, true strength requires the patience to endure loneliness, misunderstanding, and fear without the desperate need for validation. Fear, when embraced silently, becomes a forge. Each silent confrontation with terror tempers the soul. It teaches a man the difference between the fears that are illusions and the dangers that are real. It teaches him that most of what he dreads is the child of imagination, a ghost without teeth. But he can only learn this by standing firm, by refusing to flee into the false safety of another's understanding. The man who hides his fears is not a liar, he is an alchemist. He transforms his vulnerabilities into a deeper, indestructible kind of power that does not announce itself with words, but radiates through his every action. A woman, however much she loves a man, cannot carry this burden for him. To expect her to do so is to confuse love with salvation. A woman seeks strength in a man, not the endless, unfiltered contents of his anxiety. She may offer comfort, but unconsciously, if he spills all his terror into her hands, she will see him differently. Not because she lacks compassion, but because something deep within the psyche craves the presence of an anchor, not another drifting ship. Love cannot override the primordial need for polarity, the masculine as the unshakable rock, the feminine as the flowing river. When the rock becomes brittle and broken in front of her, some sacred tension is lost. And though words may continue to profess affection, the silent forces beneath words will shift. Respect, once eroded, is almost impossible to rebuild. Thus, a man must cultivate a sanctuary within himself where he can confront his own darkness without witnesses. This sanctuary is not a prison, it is a temple. It is there, in the silence, that he becomes sovereign over himself. It is there that he learns the slow, painful discipline of not flinching when fear tightens its grip. It is there he sharpens his intuition, his discernment, his ability to act decisively even when his heart trembles. No audience can grant him this authority. It must be seized, alone, in the crucible of hidden battles. There will be times when fear will threaten to break him. It will whisper that he is not enough, that he will fail, that he is alone. And in these moments, the greatest temptation will be to seek immediate relief, to tell someone, to unburden himself, to be soothed. But if he can resist this temptation, if he can sit with the discomfort without rushing to dissipate it, something remarkable happens. His spirit stretches. His soul grows larger than the fear. He begins to see that fear is a teacher, not an enemy. And this understanding, once earned, becomes unshakable. The man who hides his fears is not avoiding intimacy, he is preserving the foundation of authentic intimacy. Because only a man who respects himself, who trusts in his ability to face life's darkest nights without collapse, can truly offer something worthy to another. He does not come to the relationship as a wounded boy seeking a mother. He comes as a man who has faced the abyss and learned to build bridges across it. His silence is not a wall, it is a cathedral, echoing with the quiet songs of battles fought and won within. This does not mean that a man must be a closed vault, impenetrable and cold. He can share his thoughts, his dreams, his joys. He can even acknowledge his struggles. But there is a vast difference between sharing and surrendering. To share selectively is to offer a glimpse into the journey. To surrender recklessly is to hand over the very map of his soul before he has finished charting it. Wisdom lies in the balance, to be open enough to connect, yet private enough to remain whole. Every fear that a man keeps to himself becomes a stepping stone toward his deeper destiny. Not because he ignores it, but because he integrates it, wrestles with it, and ultimately claims its power. What once crippled him now strengthens him. What once terrified him now instructs him. He becomes a man others trust, not because he pretends to be fearless, but because he has faced fear and mastered it quietly. The world is full of noise. Men are urged to bare their souls at every turn, to confess every trembling, to seek therapy, validation, reassurance, but not every burden is meant to be spoken aloud. Some burdens are sacred trials given uniquely to him. To treat them as mere inconveniences to be discussed and dissected is to cheapen the grandeur of his personal evolution. Growth requires pain, yes, but it also requires privacy. Not every wound is meant to be displayed. Some scars are earned in the dark, tended silently, and carried forward as private emblems of a life truly lived. And when the man who has hidden his deepest fears walks into a room, he carries an invisible weight that others feel without understanding. His presence speaks without speaking. It says, "Here is one who has seen the terrors of existence and did not turn away. Here is one who has not surrendered himself to the easy comforts of confession, but who chose instead the harder path, the path of silent endurance, silent transformation, silent triumph." In a world increasingly desperate for immediate relief, the man who can hold his fear without leaking it becomes rare. He becomes dangerous, not in a violent sense, but in the sense of being untouchable by petty manipulations. His mind is disciplined. His heart is armored with earned wisdom. His soul is heavy with the weight of his own victories over invisible battles. And those around him, whether they realize it or not, will instinctively turn to him in times of true crisis, because true crisis demands true strength, not performative vulnerability. So let a man understand this. His fears are not shameful. They are sacred fires meant to temper his soul, but he must tend them alone. He must carry them through the valleys of despair without advertising his struggle to the world. He must wrestle in silence, bleed in silence, triumph in silence. And when he emerges, he will not need to declare his victory. It will be seen in his eyes, heard in the calm depth of his voice, felt in the unshakable steadiness of his being. To hide one's deepest fears is not cowardice. It is the most courageous act of all. The refusal to let the world cheapen or diminish what must be faced in sacred solitude. It is to respect the gravity of the inner life so profoundly that one would rather endure unbearable loneliness than betray the alchemy unfolding within. And that, above all, is the mark of a man who has not only survived his fears, but has been remade by them into something greater, a soul sovereign unto itself, unbreakable, inexhaustible, and truly free. In the heart of every man stirs a vision, a spark of creation born from the mysterious marriage of longing and destiny. His ambitions are not accidents, they are the very fingerprints of his soul pressed into the fabric of time. But the early stages of a man's dreams are tender, delicate things. They are like fragile embers struggling against the cold winds of reality, and it is precisely in their vulnerability that their potential for greatness is found. Yet if a man foolishly exposes these early visions to the harsh gaze of others, To their doubts, their misinterpretations, their unconscious resentment, he risks extinguishing the very fire that was meant to remake his life. The wise man understands this. He knows that there are seasons of speaking and seasons of silence. In the infancy of his dreams, silence must reign. For dreams, when newly born, are not strong enough to withstand the careless hands and careless tongues of the world. They require solitude to strengthen, mystery to mature, and inner faith to germinate unseen beneath the soil of his everyday existence. To reveal them too soon is to lay them bare before forces that neither understand nor honor their sacredness. Ambition, in its purest form, is not boastful. It does not need to declare itself loudly to exist. It is a quiet burning certainty in the chest, a knowledge that something greater must be built, something unseen must be drawn into being. It is an invisible architecture erected first in the unseen halls of the mind before it ever touches the ground of the visible world. To speak too freely of one's ambitions is to invite others to meddle in this invisible architecture, to question its shape, to plant seeds of doubt, to impose their own fears where clarity should reign. A man's ambitions are by their nature sacred trusts. They are whispers from the deep self, hints from the soul about what he is called to create before he dies. They must be protected as one would protect a seedling from a bitter frost, not out of fear, but out of reverence for the natural stages of growth. Just as no farmer would dig up a seed every day to see if it has sprouted, so too must a man resist the impulse to expose his dreams to premature scrutiny. The world is filled with voices that claim to support but secretly seek to diminish. Even the most well-meaning people project their own limits onto the aspirations of others. A man who shares too much too soon makes himself vulnerable to this silent corrosion. A casual remark, a raised eyebrow, a veiled suggestion of impossibility, all these can seep into the fertile soil of his mind and poison the roots of what was meant to grow tall and proud. Doubt, once planted by another's unconscious fear, becomes an internal adversary more dangerous than any external obstacle. Thus, a man must learn to speak sparingly of his grand designs. He must cherish his ambitions in the secrecy of his heart, allowing them the privacy to evolve without interruption. He must understand that ambition is not performance, it is process. It is not for display. The early work of a dream is invisible, often tedious, frequently lonely. It is in the unseen labor, in the countless hours where no applause is given and no audience cheers, that the dream hardens into something indestructible. By the time it is revealed to the world, it must already be unstoppable, not because others believe in it, but because the man has already made it real within himself. This hidden phase is essential because it is during this time that the dream is tested by reality, not by opinions. It is during this time that the man must battle his own inner saboteur, wrestle with the smallness that still lingers in his spirit, and defeat the parts of himself that prefer comfort to greatness. If he is distracted by the need to explain himself to others, if he wastes his energy defending a vision that is not yet fully formed, he fractures the unity of will necessary to bring it forth. Creation demands totality. It demands focus, obsession, discipline. Every ounce of attention spent on convincing others is an ounce stolen from the labor of building. Moreover, a man's ambitions are often mirrors to his truest self. They reveal not just what he wishes to achieve, but who he is becoming. This transformation is personal, private, and sacred. It does not need to be broadcasted to be real. In fact, the need to prematurely announce it is often a sign of insecurity, a subtle plea for external validation, a secret doubt that one's own conviction is enough. But the man who truly understands his path needs no witnesses. He walks silently, carrying his vision like a hidden flame, protecting it from the winds of public opinion until it is strong enough to set the world ablaze. There is immense power in the unseen. What is hidden gathers energy, what is hidden gains momentum. Like a storm brewing far beyond the visible horizon, the dreams a man protects in silence become forces that, when finally revealed, cannot be denied. They have weight, they have gravity, and when they come into view, they reshape reality not because they ask for permission, but because they were inevitable. It is a deep paradox of life. Those who make the most noise about their ambitions often achieve the least, while those who labor quietly, invisibly, steadily, eventually move mountains. Noise is often compensation for a lack of true faith. True faith operates silently, relentlessly. It does not seek to convince others because it already knows. The man of silent ambition becomes a man of inevitability. His life bends inexorably toward the shape of his dreams while the world watches, too late to interfere. It is also important to recognize that ambition itself must be protected from dilution. The more a man speaks of his plans, the more he risks turning them into objects of entertainment rather than objects of action. Talking about a dream offers a shallow, temporary satisfaction, a premature taste of the reward, and this false reward can sap the hunger needed to actually accomplish it. Every word spent describing the destination without walking toward it is a theft from the journey. Furthermore, ambition exposed too early can awaken enemies. Not all opposition comes in the form of open hostility. Often it comes disguised as friendly skepticism, as pragmatic caution, as polite discouragement. Those who have abandoned their own dreams, and they are many, cannot help but try to temper the dreams of others. It is an unconscious act of self-preservation. To watch another man succeed where they have surrendered is unbearable. Thus, they will cloak their sabotage in the language of love, concern, reason. But the effect is the same. They will lead a man away from the lonely, perilous road that greatness requires. The man who knows this guards his ambitions as a warrior, guards a sacred relic. He shares them only with those few whose wisdom has been proven, whose own battles have hardened them into trustworthy allies. And even then, he shares not to seek approval, but to clarify his own thinking. He understands that the greater the dream, the more solitude it demands. Great ambitions, like great ships, must be built in secret dry docks before they are ready to set sail into the wide hostile ocean. In the end, the concealment of ambition is not cowardice, nor is it manipulation. It is reverence. It is the understanding that great things are born in the dark, away from the premature light of public scrutiny. It is the discipline to withhold, to nurture, to protect until the time is right. And when the time comes, the man who has preserved his vision will not need to speak much. His actions will thunder louder than any words. His reality will testify to the strength of the dreams he once carried in silence. There is a gravity in the man who moves this way, a heaviness that commands respect without needing to demand it. Others feel it in his presence, though they cannot name it. They sense the silent power of a man who has built himself in the hidden places, who has endured the doubts of others without surrendering to them, who has trusted the slow, painful, unseen process of real creation. He becomes an embodiment of a truth the world has forgotten, that real power grows in secret, and that the greatest things are accomplished by those who do not squander their energy seeking permission. The man who conceals the full extent of his ambition lives according to a deeper law and ancient rhythm. He understands that growth must happen underground before it bursts forth into the sky. He knows that roots must be strong before fruits can be seen. He knows that greatness must be hidden before it can be revealed, and that patience is not passivity, but a fierce, active guardianship of the sacred fire within. In every great life, there comes a time when the hidden ambition must step forth, fully formed, undeniable. That moment comes. The man will not need to explain himself. His work will speak for him. His success will be its own declaration. His life will be a monument to the power of silent labor, secret faith, and the quiet, invincible commitment to a dream no one else could see, until it was too massive to be ignored. Thus must a man protect his ambitions, not with fear, but with fierce devotion. not with secrecy born of shame, but with silence, reverence, for within that hidden silence, greatness gathers its strength. And when it finally steps into the light, it will bear the marks of a soul that dared to dream alone, dared to build without applause, and dared to become unstoppable without ever asking permission. There are truths that can only be carried in silence. There are battles that can only be fought in the darkness of solitude. A man must by necessity withhold the full depth of his suffering from the world, not because he denies his pain, nor because he is ashamed of it, but because he understands the sacred law of transformation. True growth through pain requires aloneness, a crucible hidden from the judgmental gaze of others. His strength is forged in secret, and his nobility is preserved precisely by the silence he maintains around his deepest wounds. Suffering, when worn on the outside, invites pity, meddling, and misunderstanding. It becomes a spectacle, a distortion of the true process taking place within the soul. Others, in their own discomfort, will rush to intervene, to soothe, to explain away what must instead be endured with full consciousness. The man who reveals the entirety of his suffering too readily risks diluting its transformative power. He trades depth for attention, process for performance. He squanders the agony that was meant to birth something new within him. Pain is not a weakness to be broadcasted, it is an initiation to be endured. When a man suffers, he is being called to confront the very foundations of who he is. His illusions are stripped away. His vanities are broken. His false securities are burned to ash. If he exposes these sacred moments prematurely, if he seeks comfort before the pain has carved its full meaning into his being, he aborts his own rebirth. The alchemy of suffering demands isolation, demands that he walk the fires alone, without crutches, without applause, without the softening influence of sympathy. In solitude, the man faces the raw truths that no one else can face for him. He confronts the chaos within, the dark tides of despair, the unbearable loneliness of existence stripped of its distractions. It is in this furnace that character is forged. It is here that he learns endurance, patience, and silent strength, the deep muscles of the soul that no easy life can develop. And it is here, in these unseen battles, that a nobility arises that is invisible but unmistakable. The nobility of a man who has suffered, who has died and been reborn in the secret places of the heart. To share the fullness of his suffering would be to invite misunderstanding, for no one can truly know another's pain. Others will interpret his wounds through the lens of their own fears and limitations. They will project their anxieties onto his struggle, seeking to resolve what was never theirs to resolve. They will turn his sacred trial into gossip, into analysis, into entertainment. Even those who love him most cannot fully comprehend the unique cross he bears. Thus, the wise man seals his pain within the vault of his soul, not out of distrust, but out of reverence for the journey he must complete alone. Silence becomes his armor, solitude his companion. He moves through the world with a quiet gravity, bearing burdens unseen. He smiles when necessary, speaks when needed, but within him rages a battle known only to himself. This hidden suffering does not make him bitter, it makes him profound. It does not isolate him from others in spirit, though it isolates him in experience. In time, it grants him a depth of compassion inaccessible to those who have never suffered deeply and silently. He becomes capable of true empathy, not the shallow empathy of words, but the profound empathy born of knowing the full weight of human agony and still choosing to stand. Transformation through pain cannot be witnessed directly. Like the metamorphosis of a caterpillar into a butterfly within the cocoon, it must happen hidden from sight. The process is ugly, painful, and chaotic, the complete dissolution of the old self, so that something new, something impossible to imagine, might be born. To tear open the cocoon prematurely is to kill what was becoming. So too with the soul, to expose its suffering to the world before its work is complete is to cripple its transformation. There is a dignity in this withholding, a sacred defiance against the forces that seek to trivialize suffering. The man who suffers in silence refuses to let his pain become a currency for attention or validation. He refuses to cheapen his agony into a performance. He honors it as the dark teacher it is, accepting its lessons without fanfare, knowing that the reward lies not in being seen, but in being changed. This does not mean that a man never seeks counsel, never leans on trusted allies when absolutely necessary. But even then, he chooses carefully, speaks sparingly, and reveals only what is essential. He understands that no matter how much he shares, the final burden is his alone. No one can walk through his private hell for him. No one can climb out of the abyss in his place. And so he shoulders his pain with a grim gratitude, knowing that it is molding him into something that comfort never could. Over time, the silent sufferer becomes a man of rare strength. His presence carries a weight that others feel instinctively. They may not know his story, but they sense the vastness within him, the storms he has weathered, the fires he has survived. He does not need to speak of his trials. They have etched themselves into his posture, his gaze, his very being. He becomes a living testament to the principle that true greatness is born not in the easy paths of life, but in the hidden, harrowing journeys through despair. It is through this silent endurance that a man earns his own respect. He looks in the mirror and sees not a victim, not a spectacle, but a warrior. He knows what he has endured. He knows what he has overcome. And because he knows, he needs no external validation. His worth is no longer contingent on the opinions of others. His strength is self-evident to himself. And this self-respect radiates outward, commanding genuine respect from others without ever needing to demand it. There is a terrible beauty in this path. It is not a path for the many, it is a path for the few. Most will seek to escape their suffering through distraction, through complaint, through the endless search for witnesses to their pain. But the man who chooses to suffer in silence walks a different road, the road of kings, the road of heroes, the road of those who shape history not through noise, but through the silent force of indomitable will. In this silence, a mysterious thing happens. The suffering once unbearable begins to transmute. The agony that once threatened to destroy him becomes the very fuel of his greatness. He learns to draw strength from it, to transform despair into discipline, loneliness into focus, heartbreak into clarity. His suffering becomes his sword and his shield, his teacher and his ally. And one day, when he has crossed the desert of his private agony, he will emerge not broken, but unbreakable, not emptied, but overflowing with a strength so profound that it humbles those who meet him. He will not need to tell the story of his pain. It will be written in the way he moves through the world, with patience, with endurance, with an unshakable commitment to what is true and good and necessary. Others will sense it in the calm in his eyes, the steadiness of his hands, the depth of his listening. They will trust him instinctively, not because of what he says, but because of what he has become. Thus must a man withhold the full depth of his suffering, not out of fear, but out of sacred responsibility. Not to isolate himself from life, but to complete the transformation that life demands of him. Not to appear invulnerable, but to become truly resilient. To suffer silently is not to be stoic in a shallow sense. It is to be engaged in the deepest work a human being can undertake, the forging of a soul capable of bearing the unbearable, of loving without condition, of standing when all others have fallen. The man who suffers in silence does not reject life. On the contrary, he accepts it fully, accepts its brutality, its loneliness, its betrayals, its losses, and still chooses to create, to protect, to build. He becomes a pillar in a collapsing world, a beacon in a sea of despair, a silent guardian of values that can only be upheld by those who have endured the crucible and emerged with their humanity intact. There is no applause for such a man. No medals await him. His reward is internal, the knowledge that he has been faithful to something higher than comfort, higher than validation, higher even than life itself. He has been faithful to the silent call that demands that a man, when faced with the abyss, chooses not to scream, not to beg, but to endure, and enduring to become something greater than he was. And so he walks on, silent and strong, carrying within him the vastness of his unseen battles, the nobility of his silent suffering, and the unbreakable dignity of a soul that has faced the darkness alone and won.